Hello and welcome to Threefold Herbal Healing. I'm Herbalist Leo. I help people who struggle with chronic conditions grow their health from the roots up. But until just a year and a half ago, I was a biodynamic farmer growing herbs, and April was always the time when I started seedling in the greenhouse. So I decided to dedicate April to seeds. Last week, I recorded a video about sacred seeds, about their role in spiritual mythology. And this week, I'm recording something that I think it's very profound, very important, seeds and food safety. It's actually a topic that touches on all of us. And it's very important that we all understand and be aware of it. So every year in March, the co-op where I buy my food offers organic seeds of vegetables and flowers. Some are heirloom seeds and some are hybrid seeds, but none of them are GMO. And I will talk about the distinction between heirloom, hybrid, and GMO so you have a better understanding what I'm talking about in a moment. When I buy seed packs in the spring, and I'm also always so excited about it, there is little surprise to what will grow in my garden in the summer. Mainly because even heirloom seeds of today are so far removed from their ancestral origins. They are so tamed, so domesticated, so predictable, there is no surprise. When I seed Prudence purple, which is my favorite tomato, heirloom tomato, I know that I will get Prudence purple. I know how it will look. I know how it will taste. I know how much juice it will have. So predictable. That wasn't always the case. So let's talk a little bit about the history of seeds. The vegetables and fruits on your plate today were developed for thousands of years by farmers all around the world. The history of food begins with the wild plants that the hunter-gatherers depended upon for their survival. There was a large variety or diversity of different plants growing in different ecosystems all over the earth, and they tasted mainly bitter and sour. The first farmers who started cultivating their food also started breeding the plants they grew. They were looking for plants that were easier to harvest, more productive, and had a longer shelf life. Through many generations of farmers collecting seed at the end of the season, breeding them, and then sowing them again the next season, a smaller number of crops developed. So from a very wide diversity, it's kind of funneled into a smaller diversity. Those crops were adapted to the farm environment where they were collected, meaning the area's soil, weather, and the pests that lived in the area. So different varieties developed in North America to South America to Europe to Africa, just because of the condition. Seed collection was the farmer's insurance policy. Even if one season there was a crisis, he had in his bank account seeds that he saved from season, and he could see them again and feed his family. So when you don't have a supermarket, that kind of insurance that guarantee that you can feed your family a year after year after year is vital. Seeds develop differently in different landscape of the earth, like I said. The tomato that grew up on top of the Andes is not the same tomato that grew up and developed in Central America. So each region had not just different plants, it had different strains of the same plant. Seeds evolve with the entire ecosystem, including soil minerals, bacteria, farm animals, and humans. They became the foundation for the diet and the focal point of everyday's life. Seeds are not just the foundation of your diet, they are cultural heritage passed from one generation to another through festival of sowing, harvesting, and caring for the land for thousands of years. So let's talk a little bit about the difference between heirloom, hybrid, and GMO, and what are they? Because we all, use those words, but do we understand what we mean when we say them? So heirloom. Heirloom strains are developed by natural pollination, meaning that the wind or animals, mostly insects, carry pollen from one plant to another. Because you really can't control the wind or the insects, heirloom plants were surprised. You could never tell where the pollen was carried, what species were involved, who is the mother and father of the baby plant. Sometimes it was an awesome surprise. Some of the juiciest, tastiest tomatoes are heirlooms. Prudence purple, did I say that? Other times, not so much. The natural way of plant reproduction produced by heirloom strains is responsible of much of the diversity of plants over the earth. And diversity is important, as we are going to see. Today, farmers who want to conserve heirloom strains, they don't rely on insects on the wind, but they carry the pollen themselves from one heirloom plant to their sister or brother from the same strain. So they take pollen from one Prudence purple and put it in another Prudence purple flower and do the matchmaking themselves. Hybrid happen when you pollinate one plant with the pollen of another plant from the same crop, but different strain. So maybe you take one type of tomatoes and mix it, take the pollen from one type of tomato and put it in the flower of another type of tomato. Yeah. Maybe you want to pollinate a tomato with a long shelf life that can travel well long distances with another tomato that is ripe early in the season, and then you can have early tomatoes in July that can travel from California to the Northeast. Hybrid breeding of plants started centuries ago. It is how we moved from grass to the grains that we now know as wheat and rye. GMO is a total other story. It doesn't happen in the farm. It doesn't happen in nature. GMO happened in laboratory, and it involved manipulation of the genes of the plants. When you control the genetic information of plants, you create uniformity. So there is no biodiversity. So what is agricultural biodiversity? Agricultural biodiversity is the term used to describe the extent of genetic diversity in the global food system. So all the food in the world, how diverse are they? How many different strains do we see? In the last 100 years, 75% of the global food diversity had become extinct just in the last 100 years. For example, until 1904, we had about 7,098 varieties of apple in Canada. Now, 68% of them are lost or extinct. We don't have them anymore. Can you believe it? From 7,098 different varieties of apple, 68% are lost. At the same time, we lost 50% of cabbages, 91% of field corn, 94% of peas, and 81% of tomatoes variety no longer exist. 60% of the remaining gene pool of crop plants is not conserved or studied anymore, and 90% of them are not used commercially. How sad is that? That we are losing all this richness and all this abundance. A century ago, millions of Americans were saving seeds from their backyard or their farm. They were the guardians and keeping of plants diversity. This is no longer the case. We all buy seeds every year. Why is it important? Biodiversity is essential for supporting life on the earth because it allows ecosystem to better adapt to dramatic environmental changes. Unpredicted changes to the environment, such as disease, drought, too much rain and floods, pests, can have detrimental effect on crops, leading to famine. We talk a lot about global warming and climate change, but right under our noses, another crisis is happening. This crisis is brought about by giant agribusiness that threatens the food system and can jeopardize the earth and all of our lives. People always traded seeds, but those trades were made between neighbors. It was only in the second half of the 19th century that commercial seed companies developed in Europe and North America. Large-scale commerce changed the power balance between farmers and seed suppliers and between nations worldwide. When farmers stopped collecting seed, they faced bankruptcy if the growing season didn't go well and they didn't have money to invest in seeds for the next season. Eventually, that created farmers that owe seed company a lot of money. When a huge seed company threatened to withhold seed from farmers in another country, they weaponized seeds. Because if an, seed company in one country withholds seeds from another country, they threaten famine on the other country. It's important that we understand that colonizing is not just with actual guns. It can look like having control over the seed, over food for another country. For example, farmers in India have been collecting and reseeding cotton seeds from their farms for hundreds, if not thousands of years. They were small farmers who struggled with pests and drought, but were so proud of their heritage and could feed their families. In 2002, Monsanto convinced the Indian farmers to stop collecting seed and start buying Monsanto GMO seeds. Monsanto promised the farmers that seeds would generate plants that could withstand pesticides and herbicides, so the farmers didn't have to deal with the pesky pests anymore, and then their yield will be higher and their profits will be higher. GMO seeds are protected by patents, meaning that you can't collect seeds and reseed them the next season. You have to buy seeds every year. This means that if you don't have money to buy seeds the next year, your season didn't go that well and you didn't make enough money to invest in seeds for the next season, you don't have a next season. Farmers in India became indebted to Monsanto. Their debt grew like a ball of snow rolling downhill. Over 2 decades, nearly 300,000 farmers in India's countryside committed suicide because of their debt to Monsanto. The greed of rich people in one continent ruined the lives of families in another. A whole way of life full of meaning that was passed from father to son for generations was lost. Humans have a role as a guardian of the garden, the creator of meaning through culture. It is when seed become transactional rather than reflecting the wonder of life, when we seek to control rather than be part of creation, that we risk losing the foundation on our life on the earth, the seeds. I hope it was beneficial. I hope you take it into heart. I think it's very important. Thank you for listening, and I would love it if you drop a question or a comment. What are you thinking? Let me know. See you next week, where I'm going to talk about seeds in your plate. So, tips and advice of how to use seeds in cooking. See you then. Have a good week. Bye.